Maya had always loved to draw. Since childhood, sketching had been her escape, a way to express emotions that words couldn't capture. She filled her days with drawing, dreaming of becoming an artist, but life had taken her down a different path. For years, she had been a housewife, tending to the home while her husband, Daniel, built his career. They lived comfortably, with Daniel's ambitious business ventures paying the bills, and Maya often heard him boast about his successes during their dinner conversations. She had put her art aside, believing that one day, when the time was right, she could return to it. But the years passed, and her sketchbooks gathered dust. Her life became a routine of keeping the house in order, preparing meals, and supporting Daniel in his career. Though she felt the pull of her creative passions, they seemed distant, like a dream she had long forgotten. One Saturday, after finishing her chores, Maya decided to head out for groceries. It was supposed to be a typical afternoon, but something inside her felt uneasy, as if an invisible weight pressed on her chest. She tried to shake off the feeling, thinking it was just a result of the long week. She went through her shopping list quickly, deciding to return home earlier than usual. As she walked up to their apartment, Maya noticed Daniel's car in the driveway. Strange, she thought. He usually didn't come home this early on a weekend. A fleeting feeling of excitement rushed through her. Maybe he had come home to surprise her. They had been distant lately, and perhaps this was his way of reconnecting. She hurried to the door, fumbling with her keys, a small smile forming on her lips. But when she stepped inside, the smile faded instantly. The faint sound of muffled voices drifted from their bedroom. Her heart raced, her hands trembling as she set down the grocery bags. For a moment, she told herself it was nothing. But something in her gut told her to check, to face whatever was waiting on the other side of that door. She crept down the hallway, her breath shallow, and as she pushed the bedroom door open, her world shattered. There, tangled in the sheets of their bed, was Daniel and his secretary. Maya stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. The image before her was too surreal, too horrifying to comprehend. Her husband, the man she had devoted her life to, was betraying her in the very space where they had once shared love and dreams. Daniel noticed her then, his face a mask of shock. He scrambled off the bed, grabbing his clothes in a panic. "Maya," he shouted, as if her presence was the offense. His voice, loud and accusing, cut through the air. Maya's eyes filled with tears, her voice finally breaking free. "How could you?" she whispered, her body trembling from the sheer weight of betrayal. Instead of remorse, Daniel's expression twisted into anger. "Why did you come back so early?" he snapped, his voice rising. "You're always doing this. You ruin everything." Maya could hardly believe what she was hearing. The man she had supported, trusted, was blaming her for this? Her knees felt weak, and she backed away, but Daniel advanced, his voice full of disdain. "This marriage is over, Maya," he spat. "You've been checked out for years, always hiding behind your drawings and your little hobbies. You don't contribute anything. What did you expect?" His words were like sharp daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. Maya had given everything to him, her time, her love, her life, and in this moment, all of it was dismissed as worthless. "I want you out by Monday," he said coldly, pulling on his shirt. "Take your things and go. I need space, and so do you." Maya couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The room seemed to close in around her as Daniel's words echoed in her mind. She was alone. Utterly alone. No family to turn to, no friends to call. Daniel had isolated her over the years, convincing her that her world should revolve around him and him alone. Now, he was discarding her like she was nothing. That Monday, Maya packed what little she had left, her art supplies, a few clothes, and some personal items, into a single suitcase. She walked through their apartment one last time, looking at the life she thought they had built together. It was all a lie, and she was walking away with nothing but her broken heart. As she stepped out onto the street, suitcase in hand, the reality of her situation hit her. She had nowhere to go. No one to turn to. Rain began to fall, soaking through her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her mind was consumed by thoughts of betrayal, loss, and the crushing loneliness that now filled her life. Out of the corner of her eye, Maya saw a car pull up to the curb beside her. The window rolled down, and she was surprised to see a familiar face, Jake, a neighbor from her apartment complex. She had seen him around before, exchanging polite smiles in passing, but they had never spoken much beyond that. Maya, Jake's concerned voice cut through her fog of despair. "Are you okay?" She blinked through her tears, barely able to answer. "You look like you're about to collapse," he said, stepping out of the car and coming to her side. "Do you need help? Somewhere to stay?" Maya hesitated. She didn't know him well, but with no other options and the rain soaking her to the bone, she nodded. Jake gently took her suitcase, placing it in the trunk, and helped her into the car. As the engine roared to life and they drove away from the apartment that had once been her home, Maya couldn't help but wonder, what was next? She didn't know where she was going or how she would survive this. All she knew was that the life she once had was gone, and something darker, more uncertain, was waiting for her ahead. As Jake drove, Maya stared out the window, her mind swirling with a storm of emotions. She couldn't let him see how desperate she was. The last thing she wanted was to become a burden to anyone. So, when they neared a modest hotel, she turned to him, forcing a small smile. "Thanks for the ride, Jake," she said softly. "You can drop me off here. I'll be staying for a while." Jake glanced at her, his brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't question her. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded quickly, trying to hide her unease. "Yeah, I've got it covered." She lied through her teeth. In reality, she had barely any money left, and the thought of spending even one night in a hotel was impossible. But she didn't know where else to go, and she couldn't bring herself to ask for more help. Jake parked the car outside the entrance. He got out, retrieved her suitcase from the trunk, and handed it to her gently. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask," he said, his eyes warm and concerned. Maya nodded again, her voice barely a whisper as she thanked him. He watched her for a moment before getting back into his car and driving away. The moment he disappeared from view, Maya's small sense of security crumbled. She couldn't afford this place, and she knew it. Inside the lobby, she sat down, staring at the reception desk. She lingered for hours, pretending she had somewhere to be, until the staff began to notice her presence. She slipped out of the hotel before anyone could ask questions, dragging her suitcase behind her into the night. Days passed, and Maya found herself sinking deeper into despair. She hadn't eaten in what felt like forever, and her body felt weak, as if every ounce of strength had been drained from her. She had tried to find work, anything that could give her enough money for food or shelter, but without success. One afternoon, Maya sat on the curb near the hotel, completely drained. Her stomach growled painfully, and her vision blurred. She felt so weak, she could barely keep her eyes open. For the first time in days, the hunger felt like it might break her. Her body ached, and her mind was cloudy. She was convinced that this was it, she couldn't go on any longer. Just when she thought she was done, a familiar car pulled up beside her. She blinked, her heart pounding weakly in her chest as she recognized the vehicle. It was Jake. He jumped out of the car, rushing toward her, his face full of concern. "Maya. What happened?" His voice was urgent, but she barely had the strength to respond. I am fine," she tried to say, but the words came out as a whisper. Jake didn't hesitate. He lifted her gently, guiding her to the passenger seat of his car. "You're not fine. You need help." Maya wanted to protest, to tell him she was okay, but the truth was undeniable. Her body was shutting down, and she didn't have the energy to fight it anymore. Jake sped toward the hospital, glancing at her every few moments, his jaw tight with worry. When they arrived, he carried her into the emergency room, demanding immediate attention. The nurses quickly whisked her away, and Jake was left standing alone in the waiting area, running his hand through his hair anxiously. Maya spent the next few days in the hospital. The doctors diagnosed her with severe exhaustion and malnutrition. She had pushed herself too far, her body unable to cope with the lack of food and rest. Jake visited her every day, bringing her small comforts like books or snacks, anything to make her stay more bearable. At first, Maya was embarrassed, unsure of how to explain everything that had led to her being on the streets. But Jake was patient, kind, and never pried. He simply sat with her, talking about anything and everything to keep her mind off the pain. Eventually, as the walls of her defenses crumbled, Maya began to open up. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the hospital window, she told him the full story, about Daniel, the affair, and how she had been thrown out with nowhere to go. Jake listened in silence, his face a mixture of sympathy and quiet anger as she recounted the betrayal and how isolated she had been. "I didn't have anyone," she finished, her voice small. He made sure of that. Jake's eyes softened as he leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You didn't deserve any of that, Maya." She smiled faintly, grateful for his kindness. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've got nowhere to go. I'm lost." Jake was silent for a moment, then he spoke with quiet determination. "I've got an extra room at my place," he said. "You can stay with me. At least until you get back on your feet." Maya's eyes widened. "Jake, I can't, look," he interrupted softly but firmly. "I live alone. I've got enough to get by for a while, and it'll give you time to figure things out. You don't have to do this on your own, Maya." Her heart ached with gratitude and hesitation all at once. She barely knew him, and yet he had shown her more kindness than anyone had in years. But she also didn't want to be a burden, especially after everything. "I don't want to take advantage of your generosity," she said, her voice trembling. Jake shook his head, smiling gently. "You're not. Everyone needs help sometimes. Just let me be that help for now." Maya felt tears spill down her cheeks, overwhelmed by his offer. "Okay," she whispered, nodding. "Thank you, Jake. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "Just focus on getting better," he said softly. "We'll figure the rest out." After a few more days in the hospital, Maya was discharged. Jake picked her up, and they drove in comfortable silence to his home. It was a small but cozy place, filled with warmth and simplicity. As they stepped inside, Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Jake showed her to the guest room, and as she set her suitcase down, a flood of emotions washed over her. She had been through so much, and yet here she was, in the home of a man she barely knew, someone who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for now, she was safe. And that was more than she had dared to ask for. Weeks passed, and Maya slowly began to recover. She and Jake settled into a comfortable routine in his small but welcoming home. He gave her space when she needed it, but was always there with a smile, a cup of coffee, and some light-hearted conversation to brighten her day. Over time, the walls that Maya had built around herself began to come down, and their friendship grew deeper. They talked about everything. Jake shared stories about his life, how he had always been a bit of a wanderer, moving from one city to another before finally settling down. He worked as a freelance consultant, helping small businesses find their footing, but he didn't have a family of his own. Maya told him about her love for drawing, her failed dreams of becoming an artist, and how she had lost herself during her marriage to Daniel. Jake listened with quiet understanding, never judging, always encouraging her to look forward rather than back. But no matter how kind and supportive he was, Maya couldn't shake the anxiety that gripped her whenever she thought about the future. She had no job, no savings, and no clear path ahead. She spent hours applying for work, anything that could give her a sense of purpose and stability, but each rejection felt like another blow to her already fragile confidence. One evening, after Maya received yet another email turning her down for a position, she sat on the couch with her head in her hands, feeling utterly defeated. Jake walked in, noticing the look on her face. "Another rejection?" he asked gently, taking a seat beside her. Maya nodded, her eyes filled with frustration. "It's like no one wants to hire me. I've been out of the workforce for so long, and I don't have the qualifications they're looking for. I don't even know what I'm good at anymore." Jake was silent for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "Maya," he said slowly, "you're good at drawing. You've got talent, real talent. Why don't you use that?" Maya looked at him, confused. "Use it how? It's just a hobby. No one's going to pay me for that." Jake smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You're selling yourself short. You're creative, you've got an eye for detail, and people would pay for that kind of skill. What if? What if you started your own business?" Maya blinked in surprise. "A business?" "Jake, I don't know anything about running a business." "You don't have to," he replied, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "I do. I've helped small businesses get off the ground before. And you don't have to do it alone, I'll invest in it. We can be partners. You focus on what you love, and I'll handle the logistics." Maya's first instinct was to refuse. The idea felt too big, too overwhelming. "Jake, I appreciate it, but I can't. That's too much. I don't even know if it would work." He smiled reassuringly. "You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. It doesn't have to be all on your shoulders. I believe in you, Maya. You've got something special, and it's worth giving it a shot." Maya felt a warmth spread through her at his words. It was the first time in a long time that someone had believed in her abilities, but the fear of failure still gnawed at her. "I don't know, Jake. It just feels like such a huge risk." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "I get it. But it's not as big a risk as you think. Look, why don't we talk to someone who knows more about this? A business analyst. They can give us a clearer picture, and you can decide from there. No pressure." Maya hesitated but eventually agreed to at least hear someone out. "Okay," she said, her voice soft. "I'll listen, but I'm not promising anything." Jake's smile widened. "That's all I'm asking." A few days later, Jake arranged for them to meet with Marcus, a business analyst he had worked with before. They sat in a small, cozy cafe, and Maya felt nervous as Marcus laid out papers and charts on the table, asking her questions about her hobbies and her skills. "So," Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with interest, "Jake tells me you've got a knack for drawing. Have you ever considered going into fashion design?" Maya blinked in surprise. "Fashion design? I've never really thought about it." "Well, you should," Marcus continued. "There's a niche market right now for designer clothes that are unique and custom-made. People want something special, something that isn't mass-produced. Your skills could fit perfectly into that." Maya's heart fluttered with both excitement and doubt. "I don't know anything about fashion. I've never designed clothes before." Marcus smiled. "That's the beauty of it, you don't have to do everything yourself. You can hire people to handle the sewing and production. What you'd be doing is designing the concepts, creating the vision for the clothes. The right team can bring your ideas to life." Jake chimed in then, his voice calm and reassuring. "And it's not just a vague idea. There's an opportunity right now. A local clothing company just went under because of tax issues, and their equipment and premises are being sold off cheap. We can buy the equipment, hire a few people to help you get started, and turn this into something real. Maya's head spun with the possibilities. She had always loved creating things, but the idea of turning that into a business seemed too good to be true. I don't know, Jake. It's a big commitment, and what if it doesn't work out? Jake leaned forward, his eyes serious but filled with encouragement. I know it's scary, Maya. But I believe in this. And I believe in you. I'll invest, and we'll split the business. I'm not asking you to do this alone. You've got me, and you've got the talent. Let's at least try. Maya looked between Jake and Marcus, feeling the weight of the decision in front of her. There was fear, yes, but there was also excitement. For the first time in years, someone was offering her not just help, but a chance to build something for herself. She thought of all the drawings she had done, the ideas she had pushed aside, and how it felt to create something that came from her soul. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said, her voice steady. Let's do it. Jake grinned, his eyes lighting up with excitement. You won't regret it. And so, they began. Maya and Jake moved quickly, purchasing the equipment from the auction and securing the premises at a fraction of the original price. Marcus helped them structure the business, guiding Maya through the process of setting up her designs, creating a brand, and assembling a small team to bring her ideas to life. Maya was scared, but with each passing day, that fear began to turn into excitement. The sketches that had once been confined to her notebooks were now being turned into real pieces of clothing. She threw herself into the work, finding joy in the creative process again. And every step of the way, Jake was by her side, offering encouragement, advice, and friendship. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya was starting to believe in herself again. The first few weeks after opening the atelier were a whirlwind of activity and uncertainty. Maya and Jake worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They hired a small team of passionate designers and seamstresses, each bringing their unique flair to the budding business. The atelier, nestled in a cozy corner of the city, began to take shape with vibrant fabrics, elegant sketches, and the hum of creative energy filling the air. Despite their hard work, the initial response was lukewarm. Foot traffic was sparse, and customers were few and far between. Maya often found herself staring at the empty storefront, frustration gnawing at her. Why isn't anyone coming in? She wondered aloud one evening, wiping sweat from her brow after a long day of adjustments and minor renovations. Jake, ever the optimist, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It takes time, Maya. We've just started. People need to hear about us. Determined to turn things around, they decided to invest in a more robust advertising strategy. They hired a few enthusiastic individuals to manage their social media presence, creating eye-catching posts and engaging with potential customers online. Slowly but surely, their efforts began to bear fruit. The atelier started attracting a modest but loyal clientele, drawn in by Maya's unique designs and the personal touch that Jake and the team infused into every piece. As the business began to stabilize, Maya and Jake found themselves spending more time together, not just as business partners but as friends who relied on each other for support. Late nights turned into early mornings, and shared laughter over design mishaps became a comforting routine. Unbeknownst to them, a deeper connection was blossoming beneath the surface of their professional partnership. However, amidst their growing success, Jake harbored a simmering anger towards Daniel, Maya's ex-husband. The pain of Maya's betrayal had left a lingering bitterness in Jake's heart, and he couldn't shake the urge to see Daniel pay for the hurt he had caused her. Using his extensive network of connections, Jake began to orchestrate a subtle campaign to undermine Daniel's business ventures, hoping to bring him down as a form of revenge. Jake's plan was meticulous. He leaked false information to suppliers, sabotaged contracts, and spread rumors that eroded Daniel's reputation in the industry. At first, the effects were minor, but as weeks passed, Daniel's business began to crumble. Orders were canceled, partnerships dissolved, and financial strain mounted. The once thriving enterprise teetered on the brink of collapse. Unbeknownst to Maya, Jake's actions were taking a toll on his own life. The backlash from his interference with Daniel's business began to affect his reputation. Clients grew wary, and contracts fell through as whispers of misconduct spread. The same streets Jake had once navigated with confidence now seemed hostile, threatening to push him to the brink of homelessness, the very fate Maya had narrowly escaped. One chilly evening, as Maya was closing up the atelier, she noticed Jake's distant demeanor. His usually vibrant eyes were clouded with worry, and his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. "Everything okay?" she asked gently, placing a hand on his arm. Jake forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just tired. We've got a lot on our plates." Maya studied him for a moment, sensing the turmoil beneath his facade. "If you need to talk, I'm here." Jake nodded, appreciating her concern but unwilling to share the burden he carried. Instead, he focused on their growing business, pouring his remaining energy into keeping it afloat. Maya, too, threw herself into her designs, finding solace in her art as the atelier slowly gained momentum. Then, as if the universe decided to test their resilience, Jake's worst fears materialized. One morning, he received a series of calls and messages from clients and partners demanding explanations for his sudden unavailability and the apparent instability of his projects. The pressure mounted, and Jake found himself struggling to keep up with the demands, his carefully constructed world beginning to unravel. Meanwhile, Maya's atelier began to flourish. Their innovative designs caught the eye of local fashion influencers, and word-of-mouth referrals increased their clientele. The team expanded, bringing in more creative minds eager to contribute to Maya's vision. The once empty storefront buzzed with activity, and Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. Amidst their professional successes, the unspoken feelings between Maya and Jake grew stronger. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into heartfelt conversations about their pasts and dreams for the future. They found comfort in each other's presence, their bond deepening with every shared challenge and triumph. One evening, after a particularly productive day, Jake and Maya sat on the rooftop of the atelier, gazing at the city lights twinkling below. The air was cool, and the scent of fresh fabric lingered around them. "Maya," Jake began, his voice soft, "I know things haven't been easy. We've both been through so much." Maya turned to him, her eyes reflecting the myriad of emotions she felt. "Yeah, but we're here now. We've built something beautiful together." Jake reached out, taking her hand in his. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've brought so much life and creativity to this place." Their fingers intertwined, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in their shared sanctuary. The unspoken tension between them finally found its voice. "Maya, Jake started, searching for the right words. She smiled, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "Yes, Jake?" Before he could continue, a sudden knock on the rooftop door interrupted them. Startled, they turned to see one of their team members, breathless from climbing the stairs. "Jake, there's an emergency," she said urgently. "You need to come to the office. It's about your business." Jake's heart sank. The reality of his actions catching up to him was becoming undeniable. "I'll be right there," he replied, his voice tight with anxiety. As he rushed inside, Maya watched him go, a lingering worry in her heart. She knew something was wrong but couldn't quite place it. The moment Jake disappeared from sight, the weight of his actions bore down on him. The very revenge he sought was now threatening to destroy him, pushing him towards the same despair he had once witnessed in Maya. Back at the atelier, Jake was met with a barrage of accusations and demands. Clients threatened to sever ties, partners withdrew their support, and whispers of his unethical tactics spread like wildfire. The pressure was unbearable, and Jake felt the walls closing in on him. In a last-ditch effort to salvage his reputation, Jake reached out to a few remaining loyal clients, trying to mend bridges and explain the situation. But the damage was done. Within days, Jake's business was in ruins, and he found himself facing the very homelessness he had feared. Word of Jake's downfall traveled fast, and the community that had once supported him now turned away. He packed his belongings, the weight of his mistakes heavy on his shoulders, and prepared to leave the city that had both built and broken him. But just as he was about to step into the cold night, Maya appeared beside him. "Jake, wait." He looked up, surprise and desperation in his eyes. "Maya, she took his hand firmly, her gaze unwavering. "You don't have to go through this alone. We've been through so much together. Let me help you." Jake shook his head, tears welling up. "I can't." "After everything I did," Maya stepped closer, her voice gentle but resolute. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them and support each other. Let's find a way through this, together." Touched by her unwavering support, Jake felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. "Thank you, Maya. I don't know what to say." She smiled softly, pulling him into a comforting embrace. "You don't have to say anything. We're in this together." As they stood there under the night sky, the challenges they faced seemed a little less daunting with each other by their side. The atelier continued to thrive, fueled by their shared passion and the deepening bond between them. Together, Maya and Jake navigated the complexities of their intertwined lives, finding strength in their friendship and the love that was slowly blossoming between them. Months passed, and the transformation in Maya's life was nothing short of remarkable. The atelier, once struggling to find its footing, had blossomed into a thriving business. Word of their custom-designed, unique clothing spread throughout the city, and even beyond. Orders flooded in, from local clients to international ones, eager to own a piece of Maya's creations. The once quiet shop was now a bustling hub of creativity, with designers, seamstresses, and clients buzzing around daily. Maya and Jake had become an unstoppable team. While Maya's artistic vision brought life to the designs, Jake's business acumen ensured that everything ran smoothly. Together, they had built something beautiful, not just the atelier, but a life that neither of them had imagined before. And then, there was something else. Something Maya hadn't expected, but that made everything even more complete. It started with small changes. She felt more tired than usual, occasionally dizzy, and found herself craving odd things at the most unexpected times. At first, she brushed it off, assuming it was just the stress of running a growing business. But when the symptoms persisted, she decided to take a test. The 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. Maya stood in the bathroom, staring at the result in disbelief. Her heart raced as the reality of what she was seeing sank in. She was pregnant. A mix of excitement and nervousness filled her as she thought about how everything was going to change. That evening, she waited for Jake to come home from a meeting with a supplier. Her hands trembled with anticipation as she paced the living room, wondering how he would react. When the door finally opened, and Jake walked in, she could hardly contain her emotions. "Maya, what's going on?" he asked, noticing the way she was hovering nervously. She bit her lip, smiling softly as she walked over to him. "Jake, I have something to tell you." He raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "What is it? You look like you're about to burst." Maya took a deep breath, then handed him the pregnancy test. Jake stared at it for a moment, processing what he was seeing. Slowly, a look of pure joy spread across his face. "Maya, are you serious? We're having a baby?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, Jake. We're going to have a baby." Jake laughed, pulling her into a tight embrace, lifting her off the ground as he spun her around. "This is amazing. I can't believe it." We're going to be parents. From that moment on, everything seemed to fall into place. The months flew by, filled with preparations for the baby and the expansion of their business. They decided to get married in a simple, intimate ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. The wedding was beautiful, a reflection of their journey together, built on friendship, love, and mutual respect. Maya walked down the aisle in a gown she had designed herself, a stunning piece of art that reflected not only her personal style but the evolution of her confidence. Jake waited for her at the altar, his eyes filled with love and admiration. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and in that moment, everything felt perfect. They exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through every chapter of their lives, no matter what came next. As Maya's pregnancy progressed, she and Jake made adjustments to balance work and their personal lives. The atelier continued to thrive, with new employees taking on more responsibilities, allowing Maya to step back when she needed to. Jake was there every step of the way, helping Maya through the ups and downs of pregnancy, and making sure she never had to bear the load alone. 9 months after the life-changing news, on a crisp autumn morning, their baby boy was born. The moment Maya held him in her arms, a rush of emotion overwhelmed her. He was perfect, with tiny hands and bright eyes that blinked up at her as if he already knew her. Jake stood by her side, his eyes misty with tears as he looked at the two most important people in his life. "He's beautiful," Jake whispered, gently touching the baby's soft cheek. "Just like his mom." Maya smiled, exhausted but filled with more happiness than she had ever known. "What should we name him?" They had talked about names for months, tossing around ideas but never settling on one. But in that moment, it felt right. "How about Samuel?" Jake suggested, his voice soft. "Sam for short. Strong and simple." Maya's heart swelled. "Samuel," she repeated, looking down at their son. "It's perfect." The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and feeding schedules. But through the chaos of new parenthood, Maya and Jake grew even closer. Their love deepened as they navigated the challenges of raising a newborn, their bond strengthened by the shared joy of watching their son grow. Despite the sleepless nights, they both managed to balance their new roles as parents and business owners. With the atelier thriving, they had built a team that allowed them to spend more time with their son while still keeping the business running smoothly. Samuel became a fixture in their lives, even making his occasional appearances at the atelier. The clients adored him, and it wasn't unusual to see Maya cradling him in her arms while discussing designs with a customer or to find Jake bouncing him in the back office, a stack of fabric swatches nearby. Life was hectic, but it was full of love. 1 year after Samuel's birth, Maya and Jake stood together in their atelier, watching as the shop bustled with activity. Designers worked on new collections, clients browsed through racks of clothing, and their team moved efficiently through the space, making sure everything ran smoothly. Maya leaned her head on Jake's shoulder, smiling as she watched the life they had built together. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she asked softly. Jake wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "No, but I wouldn't change a thing." As they looked out at the busy atelier, Maya felt a deep sense of contentment. She had gone from a woman who had lost everything, her home, her marriage, her sense of self, to someone who had built a life filled with purpose, love, and family. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. With Jake by her side, and their beautiful son in her arms, Maya knew that the future was bright. They had weathered the storms together, and now they stood on the other side, stronger and more united than ever. As the sun set outside, casting a warm golden glow over the city, Maya looked up at Jake, her heart full. "I love you," she whispered. Jake smiled down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I love you too, Maya. More than anything." And in that moment, as they stood together, surrounded by the life they had created, everything felt perfect. It wasn't just a new chapter, It was the beginning of a beautiful, never-ending story.